What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast here on my YouTube channel. I am so excited to have somebody so special today here with me talking about females in bodybuilding. So, prepping females for bodybuilding shows. So, of course, everybody knows Dominic Mutascio, aka Dom Super Sliced. He is my coach, my fiance, my best friend, my everything.
That's right.
Hi, Dom.
Hello, and I'm so privileged to be on Amour's podcast.
For those who don't know, amor is our nickname for love. That's love in Portuguese.
I think everyone knows that.
If they don't, now they do.
Too.
So how is it going, Dom? How is the season going so far for you?
Good. I mean, right now, as you know, like every year, like in the beginning, I usually don't have a ton of athletes competing, like one every other week or so, one or two every like other week until the first week of June. Then once June like kicks up, every week between like myself, Tolga, Adam, and the rest of the team, we have anything from at least 2 to 7 people competing every week from now up until like the nationals in December. So,
Mhm.
it's obviously like the busy time, but it's exciting like since I don't compete at an elite level or compete at all for that matter anymore. When you guys are going into these prep phases and preparing for these shows, it's very exciting, because we're living kind of vicariously through you guys. So it's gonna be, an awesome, like, July, August. August is gonna be crazy. We have, like, I think 6 weeks in a row, 5 or 6 weeks in a row that we're actually gonna be traveling. So in the beginning of the year, we sit down and look at a calendar and see what shows that we'll be able to attend to. And, as you know, the once the first week of August or even here, in Vegas at the USA's, it's every week, until until the Rising Phoenix. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And for those who don't know, we have a pretty a larger team now with Toga entering the team for Best to Build. So is Dominic, Adam, and Toga, and myself. I take care a little bit more of the back end of the business, kind of welcoming the new clientele, making sure that everybody's taken care of. I also have my share of clients too, but I keep that a little bit more minimum for the time that I've been competing. But I am so privileged to have my clientele becoming the team too. So you guys are always watching out for everybody. So it's like if you enter the team, you enter the you have access to the entire coaching system, right? You have all the coaching knowledge, and everybody talks about all the athletes together. We revised the plans, the training plans, and sometimes we kind of spread out depending on the expertise of the person. In the case of your case, Dom, we go to you when it's more of the gut related issue, when somebody does a GI map, and so on and so forth. So it's so exciting that we have the team, and I'm so excited to be part of that too, babe. But
Y y
today go ahead.
No, no, yeah, no, I was gonna, uh, agree with what you're saying. Go ahead, continue.
So I want to talk about mostly females now. I know that you've been coaching for quite some time now. Would you say it's a little bit over 15 years, right?
Yeah, no, I've been a dietitian now over yeah, it's been about 16 years, between
Hmm.
12 and 16 years. Yeah, about that.
Amazing.
Yep.
And so I know that we have, a range of males and females in our team, but I want to emphasize a little bit more on the female aspect of competing. We both know that we all talk a lot in our team the differences between coaching females and males. So I want to touch a little bit on this subject, starting with the question that I have a little bit here, that I have gathered here for you, along with some of the questions that came online too when I posted that I was doing this podcast with you online. So the first question, will be why is prepping a female bodybuilder or any category, right? So when we talk about female bodybuilding, we are talking about all the categories here, guys. So why is prepping a female bodybuilder different than prepping a male?
Okay, so it's a great question. So ultimately, and this is what I preach to people, that prepping a female is totally different. It's almost like prepping like a completely different species. The way that
Okay.
a female metabolizes hormones is entirely different than a male. Like, a perfect analogy would be even from like a physiological hormone replacement example. If you were to say convert what a male naturally produces in exogenous testosterone, you'd say somewhere around like 120 milligrams of testosterone a week, opposed to a female can really be between like 4 and 10 milligrams a week. And testosterone is still, even in a female body, is still one of the most dominant hormones. It's just that it produces a lot less than a male, and their androgen receptors are entirely different. So, that's why if a female took, say, 25 milligrams of testosterone and they were to
Which
go get
that's a
the
lot. That's a lot.
oh, it's a real lot. It would put them in extremely high ranges, and we've seen before, even from like athletes that have sent us their blood work or even working at the clinic, how much different that is opposed to a male, where if a male took 25 milligrams of testosterone, that wouldn't even be close to bringing them up to baseline. So ultimately, like a female's androgen receptors, just think of it as theirs are like 5 times more sensitive than a male's, and how they convert these hormones and metabolize them is entirely different. So you have to take that into consideration. Both if someone's concerned about still staying feminine, and also from a health perspective too, as well.
Yeah. So you and I have seen in consultations before with females coming from different coaching teams or sometimes doing things on their own too, kind of gathering information from different corners of the gym. We've seen females taking as high as 200 milligrams of testosterone, 200 milligrams of trenbolone together. And so, what would you say for somebody that has that approach? Because it's quite often, unfortunately.
I mean, number one, like the first thing is you're going to see horrible, like fertilization side effects where they are having a lot of masculine side effects. So if you look at anybody that's been doing that for a
Quite
certain
some
period
time.
of time, and when I say period of time, also take in mind too that always something to keep in mind, that the poison is always in the dose and the duration. So even if a female accidentally, which I've seen this happen a lot, where they've accidentally overdosed their testosterone, or a female was using certain like highly energetic compounds. If they were only using it, let's say for under 4 weeks, chances are if they started to see any sort of side effects, those wouldn't be ones that would necessarily be like permanent. All right. If it was only for a short duration. But once you start doing something and you're in certain hormone ranges or have certain like androgen like ratios for an extended period of time, that's where you start to have irreversible side effects. And those side effects are starting a domino effect in the body that a lot of people don't see, and they won't see the repercussions for them later on down the road. But those repercussions could get as serious as, eventually killing someone, if they're not careful. And that's what makes bodybuilding, it can make it very, very like dangerous, especially when you have people that come off like they're intelligent. That makes it even more dangerous, because they don't understand what they're doing. And a lot of times what they're doing is going to have repercussions that are really bad later on down the road.
Yeah. I've seen before the changes happen somewhat settled, but when it happens, it's pretty pronounced, especially when you are away a little bit from your norm. So, for example, when a person is surrounded, like let's say females who are surrounded by bodybuilder consistently, right? And then you kind of take a step away from that circle, and you actually are around the people that look at you and are open and honest with you, they can see a little bit more of those differences. Even for myself, I'm grateful that a lot of females say that I look feminine, and I know it's subjective to the people who are looking at, but I've had situations before where I had friends of mine that came up to me and said, "Hey, I just want to make sure that you see that there are some changes happening, like the thinning of the hair or differences in the voice and things like that." And I like to keep a little bit of that open communication. And I always ask you to, "Hey, babe, let's keep our eyes open to certain things," because and you said it this before to me, and it's true. It really depends on the person, right? Because you can have a person that's taking X amount and not have as much side effects of a person that's taking the same amount, right? Because of genetics.
Absolutely, everyone metabolizes these drugs totally different. I mean, you've seen I have certain like, worked with certain female competitors where when they go through, like, a recovery phase after being in a extended prep or off season, where we're able to get them back to baseline and even having a normal menstrual cycle in 6 weeks, and everything is perfectly back to baseline, where there's some that take quite some time to get back there, and that's across the board with everything in terms of do they see any sort of masculine side effects, different things like that, and there's a lot of things that you can do to negate that as a female athlete, meaning, well, first of all, for starters, the most important thing when you work with a coach is that the coach should be doing a thorough evaluation on collecting data, because if I have enough information on someone, I can tell usually right off the bat how they're going to respond to this drug. Um, typically, what their response is going to be and what's the best like route to go with them. Also, too, in the beginning, like, look, I ask people flat out, right? There are some females that aren't prioritizing like being feminine. And like, look, that's
Yeah,
your own personal choice.
absolutely.
So, like, when you do like a consultation, like, even when I sit down with people and I ask them, like, is potentially having a child, fertility, is that a priority at all? They should also be asked too, like, do you care about, maintaining femininity as long as possible? So if they do, and I tell them, look, you can still compete at the highest of levels, compete at the Olympia level and do that. But to do that, and I'm flat out with them, it takes a little bit more time in monitoring your body. It probably can cost a little bit more because you see, like, a lot of the female athletes we work with, they're on vaginal estradiol, sometimes topical or injectable. They're on progesterone. Um, they're on a lot of these.
All getting from clinics and hormonal replacement therapy clinics.
Yeah. We have
Hmm.
offices that we work with that we send people to get all this, and that's a really big plus that we have.
Absolutely.
That we
Ageless
work
Drive.
Yeah, that we have accessibility to all of that.
Hmm.
Um, and again, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. And then in the female competitive industry, why it's so dangerous is because, like, you'll have coaches and even people that might have been good coaches that were with men that will do the same protocol for a female. And a lot of times, like, you'll see obviously changes and improvements, but you don't actually understand, like, what that's doing in terms of over the long haul, or like what it's doing to them on like a cellular or a hormonal perspective.
Yeah. And I think that is what I love so much about our team, because I think that bringing a female to the stage looking incredible, looking, like, for example, let's give the example of one of our competitors who just competed at the beginning of the year, Susan. Beautiful. In my eyes, she is the definition of women's physique in so many aspects, because she is, for those who don't know, and she's open about that, she's over 45. She's currently now 46 years old. She's still making improvements. She's still battling against all the open division, and always the first call out. Second place, got first place once, but second place, third place in very good call shows. She And I think that alone, Dom, is an art to be
Yeah,
able to bring
absolutely.
a feminine look of somebody who has been competing for quite some time, who is still making improvements regardless of her age, and who is looking so incredible. And that's one of the things that I usually tell a lot of the females. Look, I know you want to win. I know you want to, sometimes you want to do it at all cost because you are immersed in this I want to win no matter what, and sometimes you lose yourself in a process, forgetting on what it takes to get there by sprinting, right? And that's one of the things that I get puzzled sometimes when women just want to sprint and they forget about the logistics that it takes and the price that is going to come. And that's one of the things too that we actually lived this year. One particular person that decided to leave the team, for reasons of, whatever reason it is. But I think it kind of gets me a little bit uh um wondered, after you, not only you're able to bring these athletes to the stage, but you just mentioned to also be able to bring their hormone to baseline again, where the person didn't have the menstrual cycle for so many years and then regained that in an off season. That alone should speak volumes of a coach who can
Yeah, I
balance.
mean, the problem is that just people don't understand it. They don't understand too that forget about if you don't wanna have kids and you don't care about looking like a man. Say if you don't wanna have 10 years shed off your life and you already, let's say, have issues with your lipids but when you, like, cause certain hormonal imbalances and you tank estradiol for periods of time, that's very cardiovascular, like, protective, and now when you combine that with multifactorials, with high apoprotein B, shitty like HDL, LDL like ratios, periods of, hepatic insulin resistance. You're doing damage to something called the endothelium, which is protecting your heart. And when you do that, like you're guaranteed to have a cardiovascular issue prematurely than you normally would. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, like you can compete at a very, very like high level, you can, but with a female, there's just more moving parts you have to be mindful of. Women should get blood work done both before they go into prep and also at some point during when you are on certain hormones to see how your body is metabolizing them. See if how much of them are converting into DHT. um, Everyone, remember, metabolizes hormones so totally different. It's wild when you really, really understand it. Um, but if you go ahead and you do that, and you understand it on a cellular level, the body will literally tell you everything that you need to know to make sure you're doing the right things that you need to.
Now, in the topic of blood work that you just mentioned right now, any particular markers that you want to see in that blood work that it's let's be clear here, that's way above the basic, which we see very often. Some consultations that we have of people presenting their current blood work, and we see just basics, and there is nothing basic about bodybuilding, right? So we needed to be a little bit more extensive in the labs that we get. So for females, any particular labs that you want to see?
Yeah, so, like, obviously, you would get and I tell people too, like, high level coaching and same thing in, like, the rejuvenated medicine space and in medicine, we're ultimately like detectives. We're provided certain data and feedback, and from that data and feedback, when you pay attention to it, you identify patterns, and when you see those patterns, those help unlock very valuable information on what's needed to do. So obviously, like with females, like in blood work, you would get all your basics. Like, but instead of doing like your basic lipid panel, you would do an apoprotein B test. That's going to be the most important out of like cholesterol and lipid profiles that you would want to see associated with any cardiovascular issues. When you're talking about hormones, you would look at things like SHBG, sex binding hormone, because like if a woman has lower levels of that, they're going to be able to have more bioavailability for the hormones that they're taking. So they might not need as much as some others. You would obviously look at, your estradiol to progesterone ratios. And for females too that are competing that have low levels of estradiol, order an ultrasensitive estradiol test. That's always going to be that's always going to be best. Your basics, your free and total testosterone, DHEA, LH, FSH. And then when you get the basics back and you see like something is off, like whether it's their LH and FSH and their estradiol, you could do deeper dives and look at things like leptin, um, and start breaking it down to see, okay, like, are the issues happening in the brain? Because remember, the brain, like your hypothalamus and pituitary are like the quarterback that sit in the brain that are signaling throughout the body and the endocrine system to produce hormones. So you're able to see and then see what needs to be addressed for women that, because there are a lot of women that if they're competing a lot or they're really low levels of body fat, even if they're not a competitor, that haven't had a menstrual cycle in a while, then go get a vaginal ultrasound then.
Yes, which I
Especially
get it every year.
especially if you've gone more than 6 months without a menstrual cycle.
Yeah,
Definitely go get one of those done. Yes.
absolutely. So, because for those women who don't know, our actually, our basically reproductive, organs, they change too when we're taking these drugs, and they can shrink too. So it's important to have the vaginal ultrasound to see if everything is okay, to see really what is going on, because you don't really have all of your answers from blood work, because blood work is basically just a stamp of what's going on now. I read a lot too, and I listen to a lot of doctors, and sometimes a woman can test estradiol and have high levels of estradiols from the blood work, and test it the very next day and have very low. So she
Yeah.
might think that she's estrogen dominant because she saw, I don't know, a crazy number as like 300, and then the next day she might be below 10.
Yeah, I mean, like the vaginal ultrasounds are good because you're testing the thickness of the endometrium and the uterus. For people that have more extensive like hormonal issues, doing something like a Dutch test um might be a better option to go down. But again, people don't have to just go ahead and run and do all these tests. No, like the same thing with a GI map. Most people that even want to go ahead and do them, I tell them, I'm like, look, let me sit down and see what you're doing first. And a lot of times it could be a matter of them just having really low stomach acid, where you just fix that, make sure they have all the micronutrients and fiber that they need, and everything goes away, where they don't need to go through all these different, like, extensive functional health tests. Um, these are tools that are there when you need them. But again, just if you have like the basics, those can tell you the information that you need to on pretty much what you need to do next.
Yeah. So in the case of a female entering prep and seeing some changes already with, the response on the skin, acne or hair loss, any particular signs, that does that give you a sign what
Yeah,
to
like
look?
I would go ahead right away and I would check like their DHT. Let's see, like most of the time, if you're having issues with your hair or your skin, it's usually because your body's converting high amounts of DHT. So you'd want to go ahead, you'd want to look at that. Then once you have an idea of how their bodies are metabolizing certain drugs, um, then you can go ahead and you can dose dependent and what you're going to go with accordingly to how their body is kind of, metabolizing that. There are things that you can do, like utilizing like spirulactone, like L-dactone, but you want to be careful with that too, because remember, even if you look at like even working at the clinic when we had patients that were going making sex changes, a lot of that, there's a lot of multi things that go into that, but a big part of it is running high doses of L-dactone that blocks the androgen effects of in the body ultimately. So you want to be careful taking certain things that you don't know what they do because they could be negating what you're putting in your body anyways. You know what I mean? So it's really about finding the right um synergy from a hormonal standpoint that works best for that person. And that's with every
Any particular shampoo or any particular
yes.
topicals?
So yeah, they make like a Nezerol shampoo that removes DHT from your hair follicles. I also like doing like the topical, um, like even sometimes topical dutasteride, Midoxanil. Those are great, and the topicals are always a way better go-to because they're not systemic in the body. And there has been a lot of controversy too with say people that are using finasteride or dutasteride, if that would hinder some of your like the benefits from some of the other drugs. So that's why like using the topicals with a good derma roller, that's typically going to be your go-to for hair.
How about acne? Because I see a lot of females, back, acne on their back, especially.
It's the same thing most of the time. It's usually related to like DHT conversion. So you would typically want to shoot to lower like DHT. There's natural supplements too that you can take, but again, like it all really boils down to the person, what phase that they're in, um, and then you could kind of see what works best with them. And that's why I can't stand two people. Like you'll never hear me say something bad about females necessarily shouldn't be taking this compound, that one. With females and performance enhancing drugs, there is no real clinical data. Okay. And on a lot of these different things, like Proviron is one of them, the data mostly that they have is all like rodent studies, that and like other peptides that are out. Um, so a lot of it you have to go off of a little bit off of like experience. That's the beauty of bodybuilding. And from even working at the clinic, doctors that are like endocrinologists and really that are passionate about hormones find bodybuilding fascinating because when they study it, they're able to learn so much more information because we're a giant case study walking around that, is extremely like rare to come by.
Yeah, I remember Dr. Pierce telling me, he's like, as a doctor, I cannot prescribe more than what a TRT dosage is. But I'm curious to see somebody's blood work taking 3 times the amount that I can legally prescribe. So I
Yeah.
remember he would be very fascinated in a sense, to see and kind of study like if the person is pushing these boundaries, what what is that going to happen? Is if a woman goes, and hits a 500, 600 level, is that going to cause any issues as far as realization? I don't know. I cannot legally prescribe it. I can just watch it from outside what bodybuilders are doing, right?
Yeah, and
So,
I'll tell you right now, over the 15 years or so I've been doing this, I have seen girls have more side effects, especially masculinity ones, when the whole trend came around with all females jumping on female hormone replacement therapy. I'm saying that most females, when they go ahead and they go on testosterone, and even though that they think that they're going on a physiological dose, they're usually not for two reasons. One, they're probably not getting it prescribed from a clinic where it's dosed right. They're probably taking their boyfriend's testosterone. That's
oh,
200 that's 200 milligrams per ml. And then good luck trying to dose, 2 milligrams every 3 days on that. You think
I
that
know. Babe, I catch women doing that all the time. Number one, they don't know that they can do testosterone sub Q. They think it has to be intramuscular. So they're trying to dose their boyfriend's or husband's testosterone with the larger syringe, and they're doing double the amount. because they're getting from a vial that is a 200 milligrams per ml. So they're doing double the amount. And when I tell them, number one, you can do sub Q. Number two, you should get a female dosage testosterone, which
Still need
usually
that's those at
you can find
50.
even a 50 milligrams per ml.
Even I've seen them make it at 10 milligrams per ml too.
Hmm.
Where I'll tell you, like, a thing that infuriates me is when I see a 27-year-old female and she's on testosterone year round. Like, that is the most idiotic thing ever. Yes, after a woman is going through menopause and their hormones are going through that shift, that's when you'll utilize it. Or like if you're in a phase where I call a bridge, which especially dealing with a lot of pros where they're going from one phase where they have to take a little bit of a break before they go into prep. If then when you go into that bridge, if you put in 5 milligrams of testosterone a week in that bridge phase between their off season and prep, that's great. But to have a female that is, in their mid late 20s, 30s, that is on testosterone all year round when they don't need to be, is totally unnecessary.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when it comes to going back, women are deep in prep, and they get into some very low caloric numbers, just driving themselves to the ground, which we hear all the time, especially in the bikini figure, categories, and cardio is just, again, hours and hours of cardio. So what is that really causing, as far as, like, besides what they might think it's causing, which is fat loss?
But you're talking about just running into a
Yeah,
deficit?
yeah.
S I mean, it's a
Which we
cascade of issues,
we
like,
see it so many times, women who are on deficit for a large period of time, and they don't drop any weight.
yeah, I mean, bikini girls see it more than anyone, because they're in severe deficits for a really, really long period of time, and then ultimately, you end up having metabolic adaptations where you have to remember when you are prepping for a bodybuilding show, your body doesn't know that you're in prep for a bodybuilding show. Your body is like an ecosystem. It's not a machine where it suspects it's under some sort of stress. So it's going to adapt to survive. So what you're putting in your body that you're trying to utilize for fuel in terms of your food, your body goes into that survival type mode and then starts storing um, a lot of, anything that you're putting in your body, opposed to where us as like as bodybuilders and hypertrophy athletes, we want to create something called a glucose-based metabolism. And ultimately what that means in like layman's terms is we are making sure that our bodies and like our liver is signaling glucose and everything as fuel, okay, as a fuel source. When you are operating in that ideal, glucose metabolism, then your body's in a much more optimal place to burn body fat. When you're not, your body is going to literally be working against you to getting off weight. So that's why like sometimes like doing what I call like a metabolic reset where you rest someone and feed them to help recreate that signaling in that glucose-based metabolism. And then from the hormonal standpoint, even if you have someone that's not even on any drugs, that's just a natural athlete. If you look at Olympic level gymnasts and swimmers, a lot of them don't have their menstrual cycles and they have serious hormonal issues because remember that majority of your estradiol is stored in your adipose tissue. So, females are not supposed to be walking around under, 11% body fat. So that alone comes across with a ton of other issues.
Hmm. Now, when we are talking a little bit more about extremes of muscle, now talking a little bit more about female bodybuilder, we currently have a good amount of female bodybuilders in the team, even now women's physique, that have been evolving with each, season. Now, when it comes to gaining muscle, that amount of muscle for a female, would you see the same kind of issue that you see with women driving themselves to the ground trying to lose weight?
What,
Would it
putting on
be,
actual muscle tissue?
yeah,
I mean, not necessarily, because if their body fat is in a better range, that it's at least supporting their hormones a little bit more. It depends on the drugs that they're using, and the person. So, like, if somebody is using a 19-nor drug, like an NPP or a tren, um, you know, NPP is something that can be used. I mean, any drug can be used very effectively. Um, and I've had females at times that responded very well to those drugs. But remember back to what I said, the dose, the poison is in the dose and the duration. So I have two females that actually see way worse side effects from running Winstrol than they would if they ran a low dose of Tren. And usually, that I don't have really any females take Tren ever. I mean, in my 10 years, I've had two, and that was for specific, very individualized like reasons. And they only would take a certain dose of it for a very short time frame, and they saw way less side effects from that than they would if they were running like a higher dose of like Winstrol or a higher DHT for that matter.
is there any particular drug that you would never really um, suggest?
That's why you can't say, "Oh, I would never ever." Like, there's drugs that are really bad. Like, yeah, like a woman should never really be using Tren. Not typical. Um, Even like letrozole. I hate letrozole. It's terrible for you, but there are some women that have to use it to get their lower extremities dry and separated. It's just they do. Either they're estrogen dominant, and again, like, if someone's hiring you to be their absolute best and they're competing at a high level, I'm going to tell them we're going to do whatever's needed to make sure that we get them there. But keep in the back of the mind, though, that I want to keep their health as top priority too. And again, you might have to use these different interventions, but be smart about it. And you don't have to have a girl run letrozole for 12 weeks. You can literally get away with running that for 8 to 10 days, and
Yeah.
it will do what it needs to in that time frame. For the for the individuals that do need that. Now, there's some people that if they take that, it'll flatten them out like a pancake and they'll look terrible on it. But this is what separates like throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks, and actually knowing what the fuck you're, excuse my language, knowing what you're doing and being able to say, this is what this person needs. This is what this person needs.
Well, but that's what it takes to have a coach that number one knows their shit,
Mm-hmm.
that cares, and just like you have an X amount of clientele that you hold. That's why you have also a team, so you're not lost between
Yeah.
hundreds of clients.
Yeah. I keep my cap at a certain number. And that's because, and I've seen this with people that are recognized as high level coaches that have kind of screwed things up, not because they're not intelligent, but because they have 300 or 400 people.
And
I
they
mean,
forget.
this year alone, I had 4 people that worked with a big name coach, probably had the most Olympia athletes at the Olympia, had even more, like more than us, that both these athletes were like, why I was so flat coming in there and I bombed at the Olympia. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, you would not look like this if you ate 725 grams of carbohydrates. The whole entire time they were reading the diet wrong. The food was supposed to be measured pre-cooked. Now, any coach that knows what they're doing is going to look at someone after a few days and be like, okay, why is this not having the response that it should? And do a little more investigating to find out. But if you have 300 athletes, you don't have time to dig and find that information. No. So they're just like, oh, okay, whatever. Like here, you eat another 100 grams of carbs, or take another 20 milligrams of Anadrol or whatever. Tell them that instead of taking the time, pull out all the information, look at what they've been doing. Then it's clear as day.
And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't appreciate sometimes in the coaching, industry is that they're so consumed with the fast answer. They want that coach that responds the check-in the next day. Hey, good job. Hey, let's go. Keep going. As opposed to somebody that takes 2 to 3 days to answer all of their questions, to look at all their pictures, to put their pictures against each other to see what's working, what's not, and give them a full analysis of their previous checking.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, that would be in the
remember,
off season, but in prep though, like those check-ins when people are 12 weeks out, our check-in system changes when someone's
oh,
12 weeks.
definitely. When you are 12 weeks out, then it's
They
constant.
they they send them through the app, but they text them to us directly, where when you're at that point, you're usually sending 2 check-ins a week. And then from there, if there's changes that need to be made right away, then we'll make them. There's times throughout coaching where you have to monitor the body a little bit more closely. It's not that there's one phase that's more important than the other, because the off season is actually when you're making all of like your improvements. Like that is probably one of the most important phases. In prep, you're ultimately just pushing conditioning as hard as you can without creating metabolic adaptations. Um, that's ultimately really it. I mean, there's not that much that goes into that. Like I could give my grandmother a protocol in prep, and to get someone in shape, that's easy. But talking about building the machine from like the ground up.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that I very much I very much look, when I see, not just because, I live with you, but I like to observe, the work of everybody in our industry. And one of the things that I always think to myself, like I very much respect what you do and what Toga and Adam do, because I've seen you guys taking people from A to Z. Some, and which I find it very interesting. Sometimes you see coaches, announcing, you know, new coach, new coach. And it's like, what have you done?
Yeah.
What have you done together? Now,
Yeah.
getting one person from A to Z, let's give the example of our friend and great athlete and very soon to be a Miss Olympia, Levina Barros. Incredible physique. Everybody could see that she had a lot of potential, but they were anybody who saw her would say, it will take a few years. And
Yeah.
then you started working with her
She went from being in the last call out to the at the Olympia the
to
year
be the
before we met
and where
her, then started with her at like only 8 weeks out from the Olympia. And I think she took sixth or seventh,
7th, uh-huh.
and then she took third. But aside from the placing, that's irrelevant. Just look at the trajectory of her physique over the last 3 years. But that starts off with doing certain things in the off season, like her training is optimized, and we have someone that trains her, a good Prince. He's making sure that the workouts are getting done the way that they need to.
Somebody that understands training, not just anybody.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. Like you see, like I tell people all the time, and people miss this. You could take all the drugs that you want in the world. If you're not getting better in the gym, they're called, remember, they are called
Performance enhanced.
performance enhancing drugs. You heard what that says, because they enhance your performance in the gym. So if you're not getting better in the gym, they're not going to be doing like that. Is the most, that's the thing that's going to move the needle the most. And I've learned that. I mean, I've known that always, but I really got to experience that when I stopped competing. because I don't take I don't use besides physiological doses of testosterone. Sometimes maybe I'll increase it to 300 milligrams a week for, a couple times a couple weeks out of the year. But I've been able to hold on to surprisingly a good amount of muscle tissue working out 3 days a week. But when I work out, I make sure that I'm still able to maintain a certain baseline in the gym, which is still very intense and a pretty heavy, substantial like load. Like I don't go more than 12 days. I used to not let myself squat less than 405, but now it's like between 365, 385 for 10 or 12 reps. Chest pressing, 125-pound dumbbells for 10 or 12 reps. As long as I can maintain that threshold, I will hold on to about 95% of all the tissue that I had even when I was competing.
Yeah, no, that is so true. It's all about keeping the intensity in the training, and of course, making sure that you're eating correctly too. Not to
Yeah.
keep those refeeds and cheat meals constantly. If you are training to, become a bodybuilder, I don't want women to think that, they have to live that way for the rest of their lives. But if they want to become great bodybuilders, it's just it comes with the territory. You have to live the sport 365 days a year.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. There's ways to have like balance. There is. But
Definitely.
ultimately, you should do this because you love it and you embrace the lifestyle. I don't
Hmm.
compete and I eat the same thing every single day. Um, I weigh my food out, but I don't need to because I know it like the back of my hand. I could look at it and tell where it is by, within a couple of grams. But I enjoy that and I enjoy that structure. And then I have one day a week that I pretty much eat what I want. And then I follow a certain system, like the day after that I eat something like that, where I'll do like a fasting window. And I change my diet for the day after to prevent my glycogen stores from being oversaturated. And that's a way that you can have balance and still live a good life.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Stay in good shape. Yeah.
So, so now, Dom, how about post prep? I mean, post prep. Yes, I think it's I would say, one of the hardest kind of time too, where you are going from running miles, per hour for months, and then you get into that climax of the stage. Hopefully it goes the way that you want, or maybe it doesn't, but it still causes a lot of emotions and adrenaline, traveling around the world for shows. And then all of a sudden everything kind of goes back to quote unquote normal. You are supposed to come off certain things. You are slowly taking it down every week.
Mhm.
So any particular, and unfortunately is a very common thing that I hear females say, my coach just goes bye-bye after the show, you know, or
Yeah.
doesn't really have a solid plan. He goes, hey, great job. Let's roll into an off season. Let's keep going. So what is the transition from then prep? I'm
It's a
assuming that recomp, off season, recomp, and then prep. Can you,
it's a
can you,
super important time frame. It's one if the person wasn't prepping for a really long period of time or had a really strenuous prep, it's a time that your body has the potential to put on a significant amount of lean tissue without relying on exogenous hormones because your body is so insulin sensitive after a show um, that again, like your body can put on significant amounts of tissue with like very little to no like PEDs. But again, there's a whole shift going on after you're done competing. Once you start reintroducing higher amounts of food, your hunger hormones start to shift, your leptin and ghrelin, where that's why like people sometimes can't control themselves like once they start eating.
right?
During those times, that's actually the time that's beneficial to utilize a GLP during that time to kind of keep those hunger hormones under control so that you do not wreck that insulin sensitivity window.
Hmm.
So going ahead and making sure that you're slowly reintroducing food back in. Because if you just start eating, that it'll not only again continue to shift those hormones, but it'll just make you feel like complete shit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that and then certain things you don't want to just come off of either. Like like any sort of exogenous thyroid, those should be tapered and almost like a thyroid PCT. There's a process that you should follow with that when you're tapering off of, say, T3. You could utilize like T4, and then you start to like rotate in other things that support the thyroid, like selenium, iodine, vitamin K, um, all of those things as you're getting off of different thyroid drugs. And the same thing with your endocrine system, too. If you just go ahead and stop everything cold turkey, that's when you're going to probably notice more side effects where you want to do that, very slowly, where sometimes you'll see like for 2 or 3 weeks staying on a very low dose of like of a DHT or whatever it may be, and slowly coming off so that you avoid that massive shift in your endocrine system.
Definitely. And just to touch on something too very important that I keep thinking that I want to put it out there. We often see a lot of females staying on anti-estrogen for a long period of time. And I know you just mentioned about letrozole, how it can do its work for just about 8 days. I've seen women staying on it for months. I've seen women doing Novadex and all the other stuff for months. So what is your opinion on that?
So, like anti-estrogens for women, you have to be very, very, like, obviously very, very careful. You don't, it's not good to be walking around with really low levels of estradiol. Those you should try to use again. They are a very important factor with for women to come in very dry and hard and conditioned. Yes, but you don't need them at all for a very long time frame. Remember that. So after the show, you should 100% get off of them. And then usually if I'm doing a show with someone, I have a good idea what their baseline is at. After usually 2 weeks or so after the show, if that female already had low estradiol, we would start to rotate back in systemic estradiol. And then once that goes back in, once the estradiol, like levels of estradiol start to come up, then the progesterone can come back in too as well.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and then I know we discussed that before, but we do have some females that actually take estradiol in off season.
A lot of
Either
them,
we
yeah.
don't suggest oral, we suggest dermal.
I mean, the
Uh,
oral, like if that's all that they have,
it's
they can.
not it's not very suggestible, babe.
It's not. I
The
mean, the best, in my opinion, is the injectable by far. But if you can't get that, the topical is good, and you also need to treat the estradiol locally in like with vaginal estradiol. A lot of
no,
women will
yes,
see,
but that's an additional too. But if the
yes,
estradiol in the serum has to be on the skin.
yeah. So like women will notice they might have times where they have vaginal dryness, UTIs. All of that is from low estradiol.
Yes,
So
but the vaginal will help with, keeping it
in the
moist there and everything, but the on the skin, it's necessary to bring the levels up.
yeah, because remember vaginal estradiol, that type of vaginal estradiol, what Amanda is referring to, that's not absorbed systemically. It's
No.
only like locally.
Mhm.
But that's why it's good for girls that are in prep. You could leave that in until you're a week out from the show. It's not absorbing systemically at all. So you have nothing to worry about um, with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good to remind everyone too that the lines there are kind of remind us of the lines that we have in our gut. So it needs to be protected too. It needs to
Yes.
have the right environment there to protect you against bad bacteria. So that's why it's important to keep something like that too during prep and to assure that you are taking care of all of these things because it will have a big change during the shifts of your prep because of the shifts of hormones.
Yes.
Mhm.
100%.
Now, just for us to finish up this, Dom, I know you're pretty tired. You told me you can't wait to just relax. You have been having long, long days the past couple weeks. But just to cap it out, kind of want to go over with you what would be the most important questions that female ask their coaches when they're interviewing coaches to lead them into prep? What are the kind of the red flags or the things that can, alleviate a little bit this such an important it's such an important decision. I've heard it before. Again, I'll never say names because it's not our style to do that. I've heard it before people mentioning changing your coach is kind of like changing your telephone company. One day you have AT&T, the next day you have Verizon. So what? And it blew my mind away to hear somebody say such a thing when you are deciding to ask someone to lead you into a preparation that will be including drugs protocol, including nutritional protocol, which we know that when we change somebody's nutrition, it can cause a lot of damage too. For example, if a person spends months and months without eating fats, which fat is necessary for health, at least some. We know that we kind of decrease during prep, but it shouldn't be zero or carbohydrates for a long period of time. So you're basing the decision of what drugs to take that's going to alter your hormone state, that's going to alter your health and potentially cause damage for years and years to come. The same as if you were choosing a phone company. So it made no sense to me.
I mean,
So that
there's a
said,
lot of
with that said, babe, let's go back to my question. What are the most important things to look for when
I
a
mean,
when
there's
a
tons of
female is
important
interested?
ones, but the most basic, number 1, they should ask you, obviously, are you getting a normal menstrual cycle? Are you? And then when they ask for blood work, they should ask you too with the blood work, where were you in terms of your phase? Meaning that when you get blood work and someone that's actually knowing how to assess a female endocrine system, you're in different phases of your 28-day cycle. You're in your luteal phase. So they should be able to, from getting that data, that's how they could assess like you from like a hormone perspective. Um, but like anything else, like when you're talking to someone, you can get a sense of if that person actually really cares. Or even I've had a lot of people too that have worked with coaches and they're never ever talking about, when we're going to take a phase to kind of, like a recover phase from, between this phase and the other one. And they're just pushing like all year round. That's typically a red flag.
So
Um,
would you say that if a coach leaves also, let's say if the client is asking for the coach's philosophy and the coach says you can stay, let's say something silly, right? Anavar, because Anavar it's safe, which there is no such a thing, right? There is no such a thing as a savior. Um, drug is a drug. But so if the client is asking like, what is your philosophy when it comes to drugs? Oh, you can stay on Anavar for all year round, or you can stay on X, Y, and Z all year round, which I know for a fact that that's a huge no for you, for a female to stay on drugs for a long period of time.
no, like again, like remember the poison is in the dose and the duration. Even a compound that technically on paper wouldn't be good for a female. And just think of this when you're doing female, like their PED protocols, you want to have high anabolic, low androgenic. You want to take compounds that have like low androgen to high anabolic like ratios. Anavar is perfect, but again, remember, everyone metabolizes these
Okay.
drugs totally different. I have a, few females that don't do well with Anavar. They end up getting like a little more excessive like water retention, acne, and they actually do better, slightly better with like more of a DH, like a compound that might technically on paper be technically a little bit more androgenic, um, but their bodies metabolize it differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
So,
again, would you just kind of tell me 4 questions that should be asked?
well, number one, again, like when's the last time you got your menstrual cycle? Um, that if you are somebody, that's under 45 years old, they should ask you to, are you concerned with potentially having children? And how important is femininity for you? And again, like there's some women that's not really that much of a priority. So then, as a coach, then, okay, so we have other potential options in terms of pushing them differently if they're cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
That
And
that's an important, yeah.
pushing them differently would mean that they would potentially get to where they want a little faster.
No, not
Right.
necessarily. It's just that they have more options in the toolbox than saying to different things that they would be willing to switch up and do because they're not concerned with that at all. Even though like again, there's certain things that I just don't use really with anyone because I know that there's no need to because I've had people with elite level genetics go ahead and do X, Y, and Z, but meanwhile, do things that would be quote unquote safer. And they see better results with that if their insulin sensitivity is good, their training, their sleep, their recovery. If all of that is in a good place, there is no drug that will replace that. Even I have guys, open bodybuilders, that have ran 600, 700 milligrams of tren a week and looked terrible and had horrible results because they're not sleeping well at all. Their blood pressure's high, so that's putting stress on the kidneys and on the body, which are responsible for filtering metabolic waste, your body's ability to put muscle tissue on, burn body fat. So there is no drug that's going to be outperform those other metrics because at the end of the day, the main things that move the needle are obviously your performance, your recovery, your insulin sensitivity. So those are all things that you want to kind of keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Any particular red flag for females when they're speaking to these coaches? Because they should take this very serious. They should be interviewing them very seriously.
Mhm. Like they should also bring up like if the coach is talking about training at all because like look, it's one thing to get somebody that's already made into a Ferrari and polish it up and put it on stage. But if you're somebody that is trying to build from the ground up to that point, then again, like if they're not going there and they're most of the bigger name like coaches don't really touch on that too much. Most of the time, the people that got them to that point usually a lot of times you'll see very rarely will you see a coach. That's why I take a lot of pride into like some of the athletes I've had for a long period of time that kind of built them more so from point A to point B.
Yeah. You're not the kind of coach that just gets a thumbs up for being a new coach for somebody. I like that about you a lot because you're
I mean,
not
you
a
even know
huge.
I've had a few other top Olympians that I've actually worked with and nobody knows about because it only like for some it only maybe lasted like a couple like of months. One of them I got into a big fight with his doctor over a fertility
Funny.
topic. But I would never go ahead and be like, hey, like, look, I prepped this guy for 8 weeks and he crushed it. No, like I don't like even working with people that close to a show. It should be more about like what you're able to do, like from taking the person from point A to point B. Yeah, I get the guy, would get in great shape and go out there and like win a show, but most of the work was done. I just polished up was already there, opposed from taking a person from point A to point B and putting 10 or 15 pounds of like stage tissue and getting them inside out peeled without having to do certain extreme measures.
I think that's one of the things that I very much appreciate about you is that for you it's beyond the marketing aspect. It's like you rarely. I beg you to post on Instagram. I'm glad that I made a team page so I can continue to post and promote our athletes because you're very busy doing other things. But that's something that I appreciate, and I think all of your athletes appreciate too. That you're focused on really what matters to bring them to their best, making sure that they are healthy through the process, as healthy as they can be through the process. And for the females who are watching this podcast today, is there anything that you want to tell them, Dom, based on all of your experiences, all your calls, and all the things that you hear female talking about? Is anything that you want to leave them with?
No, just that, like one, like if you are going to do something, take it very, very serious. If you hire a coach, you should listen to everything that that they are saying. Um, and then, just also keep in mind and look at, like, do your research, like look at more so like, not just like if someone inherits a client that was already there or is, and have a good placing or like win a show. Look at what they're doing from point A to point B in all the phases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very important. In anything in particular to females now, not regarding coaching, regarding bodybuilding.
That what?
Any particular message that you want to leave females with in relations to bodybuilding, not just coaching, just bodybuilding.
No, I mean, to just make sure that with bodybuilding, it's all about anything in life is a risk. It's a calculated risk. Even walking across the street, that that when you make certain decisions, that you don't make them like with emotions, that you kind of weigh out everything and make strategic decisions. And remember that you will have a life after bodybuilding, and you want to keep your life still involved in fitness, living the lifestyle, and don't want to turn it into something like where, remember, you got into this for a reason because you love the aspects of training, eating clean, that you want to keep it that way. And that's how you're going to be able to be the best version of yourself when you live by those principles.
Definitely. That is life after bodybuilding, and we all want to continue our passion, even if it's out of the stage. We want to continue to drive ourselves, to exhaustion sometimes in the gym, but in the most, fulfilling, rewarding way possible, which that's how I feel when I am on prep. I have my ups and downs, which is normal, for every athlete, but the majority of the time, I am super excited to go to the gym. I'm super excited. It's like a project, like every time that you get a feedback, you're working on this project. You want to bring up more shoulders, more quads, more hamstrings. You go to the gym and you have all this excitement of improvements. That's what keeps humans alive, is just progress and progress in whatever they are. Even if I was given, and I say this and I really mean it, even if I was winning the lottery today, I don't think a lot of things would change right now because I'm so focused on number one, creating this, vision that I have of myself on stage, and creating this team with Best Build team, that it is to help as many people as we can through fitness and wellness. And if you tell me, hey, you don't have to do this anymore, you can just travel the world because you have all the money in the bank, nothing would change as of right now because that's what drives me. What drives me is the excitement of waking up and doing all these things for the team, working behind the scenes and making sure that we are implementing new things, we are implementing new softwares, and I'm going to the gym and I'm building this project, that is my body right now at the moment, and I take that as something exciting. I don't drive myself crazy when it comes to to how I really look, and you know that that are days that I tell you, babe, do you really think it's coming? I have my moments like every athlete, but I think in a scale of 0 to 100, I don't think I get close to the worst ones I've heard from, the ones that doubt themselves all the time or kind of live in this pile of negativity during prep because they don't it comes from a place of insecurity, and it's usually people that are insecure with themselves in everything that they do. So I think one of my 2 cents for all the women who are watching is when it comes to you interviewing your coach is to make sure that you're talking to a coach that has a little bit of this, feminine touch in a sense, like Dom is a very caring, loving guy. And I see that when he's speaking to his clients, he's speaking to his females. He has a sister. He's very close to his mom. So I see that when it translates into the care that you have when you're speaking to females. You're very understanding in that way. And another
And
thing too
that
that
is a big part that we, like, didn't touch on is some people just don't mesh well, and
yeah,
that's okay, like, it's a personality thing,
hmm
and communication, which communication is key because you as the athlete, you're in your own body and you need to be able to articulate and communicate certain feedback to your coach. And the coach needs to stay calm, collected, not overwhelm the athlete, where the athlete can be in a very comfortable environment where the coach is the one that should take all the stress off the plate, where the athlete shouldn't worry about anything and just should be on autopilot mode. That is the job of having a coach. And that's also why, like, it's been pretty much proven that elite level athletes perform better when they are on autopilot mode. And that's why, like, and if I was competing again, I've prepped myself for shows, I have, but it was very, very stressful and I would never recommend it. I perform better just not making any decisions, and you put your trust in one person, and that's important.
absolutely.
You obviously
Yeah.
pick the right person.
And yeah, so I think that was it for today, Dom. We spent over an hour here. I know you can't wait to have some time with me there in the couch.
That's right. My favorite
That's
time.
right. More time. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next. I think my next guest will potentially be Toga. I would like to speak to him about a few things that he has been doing in the team too. I think that would be a good call, and then maybe Adam too. So, all right, guys. Have a good night. Bye.
Ciao. Vito.